important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of Caregiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. It's 5 o'clock in South Florida, and so this is the Caregiver Reality Hour, brought to you by David and Paul. It's been a long Labor Day weekend, folks, and so I kind of forgot a little bit who we were. But no, seriously, it's the Caregiver Reality Hour, and you're listening to us on WWNN 1470 AM in South Florida, iHeartRadio anywhere in the world. You're watching on caregiverreality.com live show, amp2.tv, and also on WWNN 1470.tv, or .com rather. They are also streaming live. And this month, just so that you know, last month was Special Needs Kids, and this month is Caregiver Specialty Month. Now, what does that mean? Inside the world of caregiving, there are a lot of specialists. Over the last 6 or 7 months, you've heard from psychologists, you've heard from neurologists, you've heard from legal experts. And so, but there's a whole cadre of other specialists that we really haven't brought forth, who are essential to caregiving, essential inside the healthcare world, that you really need to know a little bit about what they know. And tonight we have on an amazing woman. Her name is Antonella Martino. She is a consulting pharmacist, and she has a doctorate in pharmacy. And she is one of only 286,400 pharmacists in America. And by 22, there'll be 327, which means there aren't going to be enough pharmacists for everybody standing in line. So we're very lucky to have her with us. And when we get further on in the program, and Paul and I both have some interesting questions to ask her, including abuse, polypharmacy, using too many meds, the confusion with generic medications, whether or not you need to adjust for age, whether you have to think about your metabolism, and a whole variety of other things that most of us just take for granted when we get the prescription and says twice a day. Now, what does that mean? Do we take it at 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock at night?
Or 8 and 8:30.
Yeah. And so I think you'll all find this of interest and something that we need to keep in mind, all of us in an aging world, and especially those of us who have anyone who's on prescription medication, whether that's in the autism spectrum, multiple sclerosis, dementia, whoever it may be. If we're responsible for helping them with their meds, we need to know at least as much as they don't. And we are all very, very ignorant when it comes to really understanding pharmaceuticals and medication. We know what the television tells us, and if we really listen to those commercials, we would be never taking another medication again. I mean, with all the side effects that they have to talk about, it's very scary world out there. And just by way of example, and then I'll wait until we get to Antonella, is that aspirin, something we've all been taking for the last million years. If aspirin had to go through the FDA approval process at this day and age, it wouldn't get approved. It has so many things that are side effects and deleterious, etc. So now you know why it's so tough, and sometimes why they're so expensive. Paul, how's your week?
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. In light of the television commercials regarding pharmacy, I'm going to describe this as Restless Caregiving Syndrome Week for me.
Leave the legs alone.
Yeah, we're still Debbie's still in the process of healing after her procedure, and she's the ever-ready bunny in the morning, and by lunchtime she's crashing and she's on the couch. And I think a lot of what she sees down the road is really starting to play on her thoughts and her mind, and she's starting to see the world more in terms of limitations than of possibilities. And I guess for those of us who are caregivers, that's always a worry, is keeping the spirits up for people, keeping our own spirits up,
Right.
but making sure that, you know, that they understand that there is hope out there, and, you know, fighting this, whatever it might be, is very, very important to the healing process. And your lovely bride, Suzette.
Tough week. We went to see our favorite neurologist, Murray Todd, who's known Suzette now for 25, close to 30 years, when they started the Neuro Institute together. And he hasn't seen her for about a year. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the way Dr. Todd does business is that you don't see him when you come into the waiting room, but he has this little, I won't call it a peephole, right? It's more in the lines of a two-way mirror, because he wants to see how you walk, how you look before you are, you know, trying to be on your best behavior. And when we came in the room, he said, "Suzette, I saw you out there, and I cannot believe how your tremor has gotten worse." And she has what's called an essential tremor. She's had it for a number of years. It's been exacerbated by her condition. And when he went through, not to preempt my discussion with Antonelle, but when he went through most of the medications that she's on, a lot of which are serotonin related, all of which exacerbate the tremor. So we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't. But one of the things that really drove it home to me is the other night I walked into her den, office, call it what you will, and it was taking two hands to work the mouse, because she couldn't work the keypad. I mean, not the keypad, but the, you know, the, what do you call it, the interactive little, what moves?
Cursor.
The cursor mouse, right. And so I had to go get an external mouse to plug in, and that's got her very depressed, and just because that tremor is getting worse. And lately she just, even though it's been limited, her get up and go has really kind of gotten up and went. And she's doing a lot more sleeping than she used to. She's very annoyed at it. She's annoyed at herself that she can't do more, similar to what Debbie's going through. And it's not easy. And I see it, and it worries me, because we all, as spousal caregivers, don't know what the future holds. And it's a difficult role, and so all of you out there that are caregivers, whether you're spousal, parental, doing it as a good child, or as a good spouse, it's not an easy job.
No, and David, you know, I so appreciate our support group of two, because we were on the phone quite a bit this long weekend, because the both of us have had our share this weekend, and I'm sure many of our listeners can relate. Sometimes these holiday weekends really become very problematic for
Yeah,
our
there's
loved
too
ones.
much time on your hands sometimes, you know, and even though you look forward
And
to a
there's
break.
nothing on television.
Right. Except us on
Yes.
the reruns. All right. And, you know, with just a shout out to Freddie, we are in the near future. This station is owned by a group called Beasley Communications. And in the near future, we will be expanding, quote, our broadcasting footprint up into the Atlantic area, and a number of stations that Beasley owns in the 4 or 5 states that surround Georgia. So we're growing, and it's a very exciting thing to see. And so there'll be no excuse for anybody on the East Coast soon to say they haven't seen or heard us.
And we're very much aware that it's you, the listener, that has been driving this this growing contingent of people who are Caregiver Reality Hour fans, and we appreciate it. So please do join in the discussion. Follow us on Facebook, like our page, LinkedIn, follow us on that page. Our website is available, and we want your input, and we're here to help you. David?
And we're going to be upgrading the website in the near future as soon as Paul and I figure out how to sit down with the website designer and pick and choose what we want and we don't want, so that it'll be a little simpler, more responsive, and encompassing a couple of other things than the 50 to 60 million caregivers that are out there, but also a lot of folks that are involved in advising people
Yes.
on how to plan. And when I say how to plan, I'm talking about your financial advisor. One of the things, we brought it up last week, Paul and I have been dealing through Paul's connections in that world, of which I have little to no knowledge, so I follow him. And it seems as though these advisors are now recognizing, either by themselves or because the industry is starting to recognize, the impact of caregiving on planning. And nobody wants to have a good client come back and say, well, you know, you got my estate all set up and my will is perfect, but now I have to deal with this caregiving situation, and I didn't plan for it, or we didn't plan enough for it, or I didn't realize the losses that I would incur by being a caregiver and having reduced time in the workplace, and we didn't kind of compensate for that. Not that the advisor isn't doing a good job, but caregiving can be a home wrecker in terms of a budget and planning, and now combine that with aging, and now say, oops, I have to figure out what I'm going to be doing until I'm 90. And that's much longer than we ever intended. Not that we shouldn't enjoy living until 90, and that you should, you know, do it with a quality of life that we all would hope we could have, not disrespecting the issues of aging, but did we plan in our budgets to live that long? Because there are some big surprises, we'll be discussing them in the future, that are coming up with Medicare and Social Security. Not that they're not liquid, but for another 15, 20 years, which is certainly a good thing. But there are things in the law that were done in 2003 that are about to appear in 2015, which we won't discuss until we have one of our experts here, but will have an impact going forward, and we'll be bringing you all the information on it. But it's just one more thing that has to be cranked into the equation. Paul?
Just to conclude this little part, for those of you that are meeting with your financial advisors in the weeks to come, one of the questions you definitely want to bring in that discussion is, please show me in the planning model that you've put together where you have plugged in the contingency of if one or both of us should get sick and we now need to come up with another $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year in order to pay for that kind of care. And you want to have something specific on that, because aging is not necessarily going to be of the healthy variety. We hope it is, when we do our best in our earlier years to make that happen. But sometimes aging comes up on the unhealthy side, and we need to look at that contingency.
We really do. And one of the questions that we know that a good elder law attorney asks, and one of the reasons we go, is to make sure that we have our advance directives and our durable powers of attorney. We speak about that often. But I will say to every one of you listening, if you have a son, a daughter, or a brother who has now reached his age of majority, depending on what state you're in, 18 or 21, every single one of them needs to have a durable power of attorney or an advance directive, because even if your mommy, daddy, your favorite sister, whatever it may be, the healthcare system will not deal with you because of the restrictions on healthcare law that are called the HIPAA laws. And you need to make sure, if you've got a child that went away to college this year and is 18 19, whatever the age of majority is in your state, if something happens to them while they're away, even though you're mom, you just cannot guide that ship the way you could have when they were younger and they were totally dependent in both the eyes of the law and practically on you. And for those of you that have special needs children or are older and have young children, one of the things you need to think about, besides just putting down Aunt Sally and Uncle Ralph, is who do you really want to take care of your children if something were to happen to you, especially with a special needs child? Who would you pick to be that child's guardian?
And over and above the who, with the person who's going to be in charge of taking care of that person, you also want to give thought to who is going to be responsible for the money, the finances of that. Now, it might be the same person, but it might not. They are two totally different skill sets. And to tack on one of the thought of what David was speaking about, if you have drawn those durable powers of attorney and healthcare surrogacy 3, 4, 5 or more years ago, they need to be revisited. They need to be looked at again by an attorney, particularly an elder law attorney, to make sure that they're current to the law and specifically current to your set of circumstances. For example, would you necessarily want an ex-spouse to make those decisions for you simply because you neglected to change those documents?
And not only that, but the person that you picked now may be substantially older than you.
Right.
Will they be around and competent when you need them? Can they handle the stress of making serious decisions for you? And so it's not just updated because some of the laws may have changed. It's updated because circumstances may have changed. You may have had your favorite brother, and unfortunately he passed away, and you haven't thought about those documents, and you don't know who might be inserted by the court or someone else if you haven't named successors and haven't named folks that reasonably can be anticipated to be around. Last thing, and then we'll drop this subject, although we discuss it on many occasions. When you do those advanced healthcare directives saying this is what I want, this is what I don't want, I see too often in my practice, and Paul and I see it in the people that we advise, is that nobody ever sat down with the family and said, this is really what I want. I don't want this, I don't want that. I had a situation very recently where the directives were very clear. It was a second marriage. The second spouse did not have the advanced directives. The son from the first marriage did. And he was going to pull out all of the stops to keep Dad alive, when the spouse knew very clearly that his wishes were, he didn't want to suffer. He wasn't looking to be a medical hero. And the way Paul and I discuss it is that if you do pull out all those stops and get the medical profession to, go on super drive, what happens on the other side of that? What's the quality of life? What's that person's dignity? And it's very, very important that everybody who's a decision maker for you, even when you put it in writing, you need to make sure they truly understand what you're talking about, because in moments of great emotion and things like life and death decisions, sometimes people have second thoughts that may not have been your second thought, and I think it's very important not to forget that. I think it's about time that we go to a break, and Kenny's in the control room, Freddie's on the board, and so take it away.
CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the Combined Federal Campaign, an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. The diseases included afflict people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. You don't need to be a member of the military or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
This is David Levy. I'm your host on Caregiver Reality. You can hear us every Tuesday from 5 to 6. That's drive time on 1470 AM. You can hear us on iHeartRadio or watch us on caregiverreality.com. To you 50 million caregivers out there, we know what you're going through. We're caregivers ourselves, and we've heard it all in the last 27 years. We've got great advice, good resources, and a place for you to go where you're recognized as a caregiver. So, if you're suffering, if you have problems, you know where to go. You can hear us on the radio, 1470 AM, every Tuesday, 5 to 6. We look forward to hearing from you.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back. And before we go to Antonella Martino, I want to make two clarifications. The first one is that between Paul and I, we have about 67 years of experience, all right? So they were homogenizing us together. So I didn't want you to think that we're not qualified.
David, I think we rode the ark for Noah.
Right.
Noah.
Yes, they picked the two of us. we
Two
were
by
the,
two.
Right, we were the two caregivers, and the two male spousal caregivers that went on the ark. But all kidding aside, there's an awful lot of experience between the two of us. We take what we do very seriously, and those commercials were made way before we realized that the two of us would necessarily be doing this together. As you know, we do medical research charities each week. Last week we answered a couple of questions from MRC followers and listeners. This week I'm going to do a shout out only because I have someone in my family that's suffering with very bad rheumatoid arthritis, so I'm giving a shout out this week to the Rheumatology Research Foundation. More than 50 million people are living with the pain of rheumatic diseases. The Rheumatology Research Foundation is leading efforts to improve the health of people with rheumatic disease by supporting education, training, and research that will lead to advances in treatment and one day, hopefully, cures. Established in 1985, it has invested more than $100 million into its awards and grants and is the largest private funding source of rheumatology research and training programs, and targets particularly debilitating rheumatic diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and similar types of inflammatory arthritis. It has consistently received a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator, America's largest independent evaluator of charities. And on average, which is something that I think is excellent, 90 cents of every dollar donated to the foundation is used to fund those awards. And so you can make a donation either through medicalresearchcharities.org, go to the site, click on Rheumatology Research, or you can go directly to their site and see what they're doing at www.rheumatology.org. That's RHEUMATOLOGY, rheumatology.org, and you'll be making a contribution that will be hopefully used to help millions and millions of people, because in an aging world we see an awful lot of arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis.
Even with children.
And with children as well. But now it's my distinct pleasure to hand it over to Paul and Antonella Martino, who is a consulting pharmacist. And Paul, why don't you take over?
Welcome, Antonella. Thank you so much for joining us today. A consulting pharmacist is a rather different type of a title. Can you tell us a little bit about what your designation is and exactly what it is that you do?
Yes, consultant pharmacist is someone that specializes in geriatric care. So we do assess medication therapies for anybody that is over 65 and older.
Okay.
And is there any special training different than normal pharmacy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A second license is required to be to study, of course, and take an exam, state exam, to pass and become certified, and do some training as well with other consultant pharmacists before we become one. So definitely a second license, Simon.
All right. But you have a PhD in pharmacy, is that not correct?
Yes, a doctorate of pharmacy is my actual degree.
Okay.
David and I have often spoken about having a go-to team when we're dealing with our loved ones as caregivers, and we feel that a master pharmacist is so important to be part of that go-to team. Can you give us a little bit of the reasons why, from your perspective, you need to be part of that equation?
Yes, absolutely. Well, we probably know that many things can go wrong when we deal with medications or medical conditions and their treatment. So a pharmacist definitely is an expert in that field and can give suggestions and advices on how to better handle medications and their safety.
Yeah, so important.
It absolutely is. And I know even this past week, without casting any aspersions, when we went to see Dr. Todd, and my wife handed him the list of things that she was taking. You know, he brought out his little PDR and his little black book, and even though he's been practicing medicine for probably close to 50 years, it's very hard to keep up and be concerned about interactions, side effects, and other kinds of issues that come about with pharmaceuticals. And I know, because I just watched my niece go through medical school and is now awaiting her fellowship, and one of the things she said, in a world of pharmacy, they don't get a lot of pharmaceutical training. And ultimately what happens, and we see it now very often and I don't mean to take over your time, but that doctors get used to prescribing certain medicines because that's what they grew up with, that's what they learned about, that's what the medical representatives have brought to them, and so they tend to prescribe against things that they're familiar with. And when they do learn about new meds, it's either through that drug representative or their professional publications. Would you comment on that?
Yes, that is true.
I don't mean for you, I'm not looking for you to beat up on physicians,
No,
but
absolutely not. That's not our scope. But majority of time, yes, it works that way. And we pharmacists are actually on the end of being able to provide unbiased information regarding those medications and research and FDA approvals afterwards, so to educate, including physicians, nurses, other health professionals about what is good.
Antonella, oftentimes when you go to the pharmacy to pick up your medications, in that very hurried fashion as to swiping the credit card, someone will say to you, have any questions about this new medication? And it's sort of like part of the routine. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what should you say when that question is asked to you? What kind of questions might you ask?
Sure. Well, a new medication, definitely you want to learn more about if you didn't have that conversation prior with your physician, if you didn't have sufficient time to discuss. But definitely, when is the best time to take that medication? If it's said to be given daily, is it at morning? Is it an empty stomach? Is it with food? What's the best way for your body to absorb that medication? So that would be one of the most important questions first.
Right. And what about how it might affect you in addition to other medications that you're taking? Because usually we use the same pharmacist, or at least the same pharmacy. It may not be the same pharmacist, but they do have the ability to pull up your record and see what else you take.
Sure.
All right. Now, you're a consulting pharmacist, and this is more of your specialty. And I don't mean this in any way, but with the deepest respect, but is the average pharmacist behind the counter in CVS or Walgreens or wherever it may be skilled at discussing those kinds of interactions? Is it something they're conversant with, or is it really somebody with the advanced knowledge that you have?
No, every pharmacist is able to, of course, discuss any interactions that may be among medications and supplements or vitamins and other over-the-counter products we may be taking. Sometimes we just don't have the time at the dispensing level, but any major potential interaction is discussed, whether we can go ahead and give that medication or not to the person. But there are so many different things to consider if our pharmacist is aware of everything we really do at home, with vitamins, with supplements, with over-the-counters. So that's when consultant pharmacists kind of come in and look at everything, home visits, home medicine cabinet visits, and really discuss every single item. So it's a bigger picture assessment that we feel important should be done beside the dispensing point.
Antonella, we see a lot in the media about what they call polypharmacy. And can you tell our listeners what do they mean by polypharmacy, and why is that something that they should be very, very concerned about?
Sure. Polypharmacy is the use of multiple medications that can be necessary or unnecessary. And that's where we want to really have a detailed assessment of each medications. What is it used for? Are we getting, results from the medications that we are receiving? Or it's something that was prescribed 20 years ago, and never really reevaluated by our current physician, and may not feel comfortable discontinuing the medication, but there may be no longer an issue to continue taking that medication. So we also communicate with physicians all this information and assessment we do with the individual.
One of the questions I have is, I know that one of the reasons that polypharmacy rears its head in this day and age, we go and see many different kinds of doctors and specialists,
Yes.
each who prescribe for the disease or the modality that's right in front of them. And even if we bring in a list, the medications that the cardiologist may prescribe versus what the pulmonologist may prescribe versus what the urologist might describe are not necessarily, in other words, if I'm a cardiologist, I pretty much know what are the cardiology medications and what I'm going to prescribe, but I may not really have a great handle on what the other specialists are prescribing in their medical prescriptive world. Are you the person that can sit on top of that? And because everybody seems to be afraid, you know, you got to keep taking my meds, and I really am very concerned about taking you off of any other specialist, both for liability, and I may not be 100% sure exactly what it's doing with your other condition. Could you speak to that for a moment?
Sure. I think that the point would be that even different medications for different medical conditions may work similarly or in opposition to the other medication. So medication don't only work one way, they work in different system of our body. So I may duplicate or triplicate actions by using different medication for different conditions. So that's the point.
So you're kind of taking a hyper pill, maybe, you know,
Right.
or a double or triple dose.
Yes.
Even though it came from different doctors for apparently different
Yes.
reasons.
Antonella, when they do the testing on these medications, how many typically will they test against? 3, 4, 5, 6 different kinds of medications? Because, I mean, some of our clients are taking 7, 8, 9 different medications. Do they have statistics, or do they have some sort of research on how they interact with that many of them?
No, their interactions are based on the way the medication works. So we consider a certain mechanism to be affecting the mechanism of other medications. So it's not specifically studied at the level of each individual medications, but more of how they work and how could they affect each other.
And even when you get out to, as Paul said, 8 or 9 or 10 meds, you can still track those interactions, or do you reach a point kind of where the equation gets too busy? You know, in other words, you know, the one you started with has a problem with number 2, and it may have a problem with number 5, and may have a problem with number 8, but you can't give up number 8. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
and,
like
and
a
I
compromise.
recognize that there has to be some form of finite, where can we get to before we just kind of throw up our hands in frustration and say, this is polypharmacy and we've got to live with it.
Well, a lot of the medications, minor interactions, even by the way they work, it's monitoring. So if I have to stay on certain medications and I need to take others that may potentially interact in a minor way, there is always like the monitoring parameters that our physician is responsible for checking. So although we may be at risk of some side effects, we are checked, you know, to avoid the incidents from happening.
Is that a physical check? Is that a urine test? Is that a blood test? How do we understand? I mean, I know if I take a pill and I feel
Sure.
lousy, then probably I shouldn't be taking it, even though it might be doing good.
Right. We hope to have, you know, all the diagnostic testing and blood work or urine samples, you know, before we get those symptoms that we may experience a side effect.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah, I have a question, David. Just last week, Debbie needed to get a new medication filled, and we're in a world of generic medications today, and
Right.
you know, it's probably a good thing. I'm not going to address that. But it was a 3-month supply of medication, and I opened up the bottle and I looked inside the bottle, and I saw 3 different color pills, all of that medication. And yeah, I just sort of had a feeling, how do I know that that's really the same medication when they look entirely different? Different markings, some of them were actually different size.
Okay. Well, different manufacturers of the same generic medication may have different shapes, different color, different symbols on them. So definitely in that instance, call the pharmacist, tell them that, you know, in your bottle you had 3 different colors pills. You want to make sure they look different than normal, and you want to make sure that it's just right medication, different manufacturers, or if there is really an error of some sort. Normally people know the color and the shapes of their pills. You can also go online, you know, and check. On some websites you can do a pill identifier, and you can put, you know, the shape, the color, what's on that tablet or capsule, and you can kind of identify that way. But before you go there, you may want to call your pharmacist.
Or bring the pills back and have them take a look at it.
Yes, absolutely.
Is this for branded, or do they carry it through with generic, as far as what does the tablet or capsule look like? Because in the case of my wife, and to some degree to myself, we're on generics, and these days they all look kind of like aspirin. You know, they're all round, white. You know, maybe there's an imprint on them, but maybe except for size. And if, you know, notwithstanding that I wear glasses, but in the middle of the night, it's tough enough to grab the right pill if you need it. And when they all start looking the same, I guess there's nothing in the world of generics that says they have to kind of emulate or model the regular branded pill, because that may still be protected by the patent, even though the chemical patent expired. Maybe the design pattern of what it looks like, you know, the purple pill, the yellow pill. And that's, as you said earlier, that's what most people, I take 2 yellows, 1 blue in the morning, a green and white at lunchtime, and then 2 reds and an orange at night, you know. And now they're all white.
Right,
Yeah, and so that I assume it can cause a lot of confusion, as well as mixed medication.
Yes, no, absolutely. But you want to be able to distinguish between each manufacturer and each brand products. So yes, they are identifiable in color, shape, and in prints.
I put labels on the top of my bottles, you know, because
What do they
Yes.
say, David?
they're different colors, so I know what they are. Or I'll put a black dot because it's a nighttime pill, and a yellow dot on top because it's an not that I have an afternoon pill.
That's a great idea.
All right, and a red
Sure.
one that says these are morning pills. So at least I know how they line up in height order, because they all seem to come these days in the same brown bottle with the same
Yes.
white safety cap. And
Which I can never get over.
right, and notwithstanding that they're generic on the outside, I mean, in terms of the pill, they also come very generically packed, and it's very difficult sometimes if you're in a hurry and there's more than a couple of pills. So I've gotten into a ritual with my wife, as I know you have, Paul. At night, I stand there and I line up the bottles, and then I put the pill in front of the bottle. I mean, it's like baby steps,
Yes.
but I'm really concerned. And that was one of the things that I wanted to ask you. I know a lot of older folks on a lot of medication that use the infamous pill box, you know, the
Yes.
one that's set up for the week in days and morning, noon, and night. And that's a lot of pills in a box. And I just wonder at times, shaky hands, poor eyesight, whether or not that box can cause as much confusion as it can make a little clearer taking those medications, because I've gone into people's homes when I've asked, and I've looked under the bureau where they normally take their meds, where pills have bounced, and you know, and so you just know either they're not taking them, maybe they're taking a couple of the same, they forget because it isn't clear whether Tuesday's Wednesday or Thursday, and we're all guilty of that. But I wonder whether or not, you know, in institutions like hospitals and nursing homes, they're coming around, they're checking the barcode on your wrist.
Sure.
It's coming out of the machine, it's being dispensed in a bubble pack. So even professionals, all right, have cross checks on what they're doing. We as lay people at home have none of that. And I just see that in an increasingly more medicated aging world becoming an even greater problem. Are there any solutions you're aware of on the horizon? Is there anything that, I know that may be the million-dollar question and you can't answer it, but
Pending, patent pending.
Yes.
all right.
Well, there are some better systems that can organize your medication without the problem of dropping them, you know, electronic systems that they alert you, you know, at the morning time by flashing or a sound that can open up the only box that needs to be open for that particular day, and there may be filled for months, for the month. So that is a little bit more safe than maybe the single weekly pill
Open the
box
box and
that
they
can
all-
fall
yeah.
and everything can get
Mixed up.
mixed up, and even more chances of error occurring
right.
than using it from the bottle.
I know that, you know, in the world of pharmacy, we can hit certain limitations. I'm kind of aware, you know, the frustration that everybody has because there isn't anything new and exciting in, let's say, the Alzheimer's pipeline.
Right.
But I'm concerned because what I do see more and more of is the warnings that are coming down that we don't have enough antibiotics in the pipeline, and that we have been medicated over the years. When we go in and complain, I have a cold, I have the flu, and it's easy enough to write a prescription. And we've kind of created superbugs. That's how we got MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, and others. And so where are we? Do we have anything that you're aware of coming down in the pipeline? And how close to the tippy top are we now in terms of the superbugs like MRSA?
Well, unfortunately, I have not heard of anything coming up that is, you know, more broad spectrum covering, you know, a larger number of bacteria or a virus, just because it seems like we have exhausted all our sources, and we have used probably antibiotics in the wrong way more often than we would have liked in our body. Obviously, maybe also not having taken them for the full duration.
Right.
We have created resistance ourselves, you know, and now we are in a not so easy situation when it comes to very serious infections.
Right. We see that a lot with urinary tract infections.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The short duration pills that don't
Sure.
work,
Yeah.
and they tend
Get
to
changed.
repeat themselves and create superbugs.
Yep.
Yes.
I know this is a little sensitive, Antonella, so maybe get a little bit of guidance here. The cost of these medications,
Yes.
do they just seem to be going through the roof? And I know that there are people who are listening who sometimes have to make decisions between medicine and eating. I had a pharmacist recently tell me that there was a medication that Debbie was taking that were 50 milligrams. I'm not going to mention the medication. And it was a by the way. He says, did you know that these came in 100 milligrams? And if you speak to your doctor, you can break the pills in half and actually buy half the number of pills, and that dramatically brought the cost down.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to the pricing of these medications? Because some of them are really getting outrageous in price.
Well, I guess it's another pharmacist's role to contain cost and, knowing ways that we can sometimes save some dollars in some situations. That's definitely sometimes a way to do it if the strength that we need to take is available in larger and we can take half. But definitely there is different pricing, I guess different pharmacies because of the distribution process. So you may want to shop around if cost is a concern, even for your generics medication, based on the insurances that you may have, or if you're paying out of pocket for your medications, you can just call in and maybe find out if in the area you have better pricing.
And it doesn't
than
always have to
other-
be at a retail pharmacist. I know, Paul, you go to Costco.
I do.
All right, and I know a lot of people go to Walmart and use the pharmacies inside of those big box stores, and you can see some dramatic savings over what you may get on the outside. Not saying that anybody's trying to get away with anything, but organizations that are used to deep discount, like Walmart and Costco, tend to buy their drugs in a similar fashion, and even if they don't make a lot of money on them, they're kind of what they call loss leaders and bring you into the store and you'll buy something else, and that used to be the whole rationale of why the pharmacy was always in the back of the store and everything else was lined up in the counter, so that hopefully, you bought some things at a better retail price
Yeah.
on the way to getting your prescription.
Actually, one of the supermarkets here, and I'll mention the name Publix, there are certain medications that they fill without cost. And
Well, that's because these
Yes.
generics have gotten down to exactly that. Rather than give you a discount on carrots, they'll give away, the
with a
antibiotic.
prescription. I
Yeah,
mean,
well, I didn't mean that
Yes.
you were getting
Yeah.
it without them. But this is a subject, Antonella, that going forward, I'm going to ask you to come back because
yes.
this is not a one-time once
Right.
kind of a thing, and nor is it anything that's going to change real soon. And so having good guidance, being able to kind of wend our way through the pharmaceutical process to the extent that we laymen can. If somebody wants to have you consult for them, or how does one get in touch with you?
They can contact me via phone,
Okay, your number is?
954-650-2147.
Repeat it, please.
954-650-2147.
And your email is? Or your website, whichever one you care to give?
Sure. My website is www.hcpamerica@gmail.com.
So that's Harry
So-
Charles Peter America.
At gmail.com
gmail.com.
for my address,
Okay.
email address.
Do you have any, before because we're just about out of time, any
Sure.
last comments or thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with before we wrap up tonight?
Yes, I'd like to say to, become educated about your medications, why you're taking it for, and what they do, and what are the major side effects. Stay informed because the medical information and research changes every day. And take responsibility for your health. You are the one that has a shared responsibility with physicians and pharmacists and caregiver to be well aware of what you're doing.
Thank you.
I think that's
Great advice.
great advice. And I also want to give a shout out tonight to Arden Court, one of our sponsors. I know that there may be a bed coming up in Delray at the Arden Court if you think you need it. 561-498-5552. Ask for Marsha. I'm not kidding. It's just that there's always a line, and I
Yes.
happened to have been there the other day, and they said they thought there was one coming up, and that's 561-498-5552. They're right on Jog Road, just before Linton Boulevard. We'll be at the Manor Care Nursing Home tomorrow morning. Our support group films The one from 2 weeks ago
Yes.
was posted today on the website. So if you want to see caregivers in action, that's the place. We don't script it. We don't control it. Whatever they have to say, whatever's on their mind, it gets on the table. It gets discussed. In the future, Paul and I had an opportunity last week to go see a very interesting young man by the name of Andrew Berkey. And he is on the campus of FAU dealing with students that have addiction issues. It's called Life of Purpose, and it is an academic-focused substance abuse program. And we kind of saw it in action, and they purchased some homes in the area that are set up like dormitories for students. And the counselors that advise them are not only talking about addiction, but they are driving them through academic performance. And some of the turnarounds from some of the people that he described who were really in big trouble and then turned around, got back on track, got their master's degree, et cetera, is very, very heartwarming, very unusual. And
We'll have him on
and
interview.
we'll have him on in the near future. But this is an exciting program, and it's going on, at least for those of you here in the South Florida area, right in our own backyard at Florida Atlantic University. As we get further on in educating the public, I want you to know that our book on practical problem solving for the caregiver is available on Kindle. You simply have to go put in David Levy Caregiving, and the book will pop right up. And I think for under $8, it's a value worth having just for the education. I did not write about how I take care of my wife. This isn't a book about what I remember taking care of my father, my mother, which I did. This is about what we've learned over the last quarter of a century, dealing with caregivers, understanding their needs, trying to find solutions, and then putting it down by way of examples in an easy to use, easy to understand format. And I just want everybody out there to understand that it's available, and it will give you a great grounding in caregiving, no matter what stage of caregiving you're at. And it will also allow you to write your own, in your own words, your own caregiver plan, so that you have a better handle on what you're doing. And the forms that we put in there, if you fill them out, are a great list of the things you need to know where they are and what they're doing. Antonella, I want to thank you again. Paul, why don't you take it home?
Well, yes, thank you, Antonella. Tremendous.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening tonight and being with us. Be sure to join us next Tuesday evening. And as I say every week, caregivers, have a great week and take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality.